Imagine a market of 4 billion people, eager for quality products and services, just bursting with untapped potential. And that's the big idea we're diving into today with C.K. Prahalad's book, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid.
And it's not about charity either. Prahalad's point is that serving these often overlooked consumers, these folks at the bottom of the pyramid, is smart business. Sustainable, profitable models that benefit companies and these communities at the same time.
Right, a real win-win. We've got excerpts from Prahalad's book itself today, packed with real-world examples, companies like Jaipur Rugs, Casas Bahia, and ITC Chopal. But before we get to those, I'm curious, when you first came across this whole idea of a fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, what was your reaction?
It was a real paradigm shift for me. You know, we usually hear about poverty as this problem to be solved, but Prahalad flips that on its head. He says, don't see the BOP as victims, but as resilient consumers and entrepreneurs.
And he challenges all those common assumptions about the BOP, doesn't he? Like, I used to think people with limited incomes, they probably don't care about brands as much. But then Prahalad uses the example of Casas Bahia in Brazil selling things like appliances. And it shows that BOP consumers are brand conscious. They want quality and they want a better life.
Exactly. It's all about understanding the real needs and aspirations of the BOP, which we often underestimate. Another myth he tackles is that the BOP isn't ready for advanced technology.
Oh, right. And he brings up ITC's eChopal initiative as the perfect example, setting up computers in villages across India, giving farmers access to real-time market info. Even soybean futures on the Chicago Board of Trade.
It's a great example of how we can use technology to empower BOP communities.
So it's about challenging those preconceived notions and recognizing the potential in these communities as consumers and as entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. And that's where the fortune comes in. Prahalad argues there's this massive untapped market here, a huge opportunity for businesses willing to come at it with a fresh perspective.
Okay, so let's get into those case studies because I think that's where this really comes to life. First up, Jaipur Rugs. You know, I've actually seen their rugs in high-end design magazines, and it always gives me a little thrill knowing where they came from. Hand-woven rugs, traditional skills connecting rural India to global markets. It's quite a journey.
Jaipur Rugs is a perfect example of what happens when you invest in the BOP. They could have just sourced rugs the easy way, but they went further, creating a system of fair wages and leadership training for over 40,000 weavers, many of them women. That's the impact Prahalad is talking about.
And the logistics of it all, it's mind-boggling. These rugs are crafted in rural India, then shipped all over the world. How do you even begin to manage a supply chain across such vast distances?
It's incredibly intricate. Each rug is like it's woven into this web of trust, skill, and tradition, meticulous planning, and deep respect for the artisans and their craft.
So it's not just about the product, it's about the entire ecosystem around it.
Precisely. And Jaipur Rugs gets that. They've invested heavily in leadership development at the grassroots level, empowering their weavers to really take ownership of their work and their communities.
Okay, before we get too deep into Jaipur Rugs, what about these other companies Prahalad talks about? Casas Bahia, for instance. They're revolutionizing retail for the poor in Brazil. And I'm fascinated by how trust plays into their model.
Yeah, their credit system is a great example. They recognize that lots of their customers don't have traditional credit histories. So Casas Bahia built a system based on evaluating character and the potential to build a better life. A real testament to the power of trust when you're building a business at the bottom of the pyramid.
It's amazing how Casas Bahia turned the whole idea of creditworthiness on its head, looking beyond those traditional credit scores to see the potential in their customers. Speaking of flipping scripts, Prahalad also talks about ITC's eChopal, and that one really blew me away. We touched on how they're giving farmers access to technology, but the impact of that goes way beyond just giving them computers, right?
Absolutely. See, before eChopal came along, these farmers were often at the mercy of middlemen. These middlemen controlled all the information about prices and markets, but ITC saw an opportunity to empower those farmers. Give them direct access to that information.
Yeah, it's like handing them the keys to their own destinies. Giving them the power to negotiate better prices, connect directly with buyers, break free from those exploitative cycles.
Exactly. It created this win-win-win situation. ITC gets a more reliable supply chain, the farmers get more control and better incomes, and the whole community benefits from that economic boost.
It's incredible how much potential you can unlock just by fixing that information imbalance. It reminds me of Prahalad's concept of an ecosystem for wealth creation. What does that actually look like in practice?
Imagine a tree trying to grow all alone. It needs good soil, sunlight, water. This whole network of interconnected elements to support its growth. An ecosystem for wealth creation is similar. It's about creating an environment where people have what they need to create their own wealth, the resources, the knowledge, the opportunities.
So it's not just about giving someone a product or a job. It's about giving them the tools and the environment they need to thrive.
Exactly. And that often means rethinking traditional business models. For example, Prahalad talks about the importance of small unit packages for the BOP market.
Okay, I've seen that in action when I've traveled, like single-use shampoo sachets instead of a big bottle. Is that what he's talking about?
That's a perfect example. You can't sell a big bottle of shampoo to someone who only has a few rupees to spend. It's about understanding the buying power and habits of the BOP consumer.
So you've got to design your products and your business models around their lives, not just assume that what works in a developed market will work everywhere.
Exactly. And that kind of thinking leads to some really innovative solutions. Think about all the advancements in mobile banking we've seen in places like Kenya and India.
Because so many people don't have access to traditional banks there.
Exactly. That constraint has driven some incredible innovation in fintech. And now those innovations are having a global impact.
Like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention. But here it's not just about inventing new things. It's about creating real lasting change.
And that brings us to another crucial piece of building this wealth creation ecosystem, transaction governance capacity.
Okay, that one sounds a little jargony. Break it down for us. What is TGC and why does it matter?
So TGC is basically about creating a system where transactions can happen fairly and openly. It's about having laws and regulations, sure, but also about making sure those laws are actually followed and that there are ways to hold people accountable.
So it's not enough to just have rules written down. You've got to create a culture where people trust that those rules will be enforced.
Exactly. And that's where companies can play a huge role. They can push for better governance, work with local communities to build that capacity, and put ethical business practices into place that set a good example.
So they're not just passive players in the system. They can be agents of change, making the business environment more equitable and fair.
Exactly. And when companies do that, they're not just doing good for society, they're also creating a more stable and predictable business environment for themselves. It's a win-win.
And that really connects with Prahalad's idea of development as social transformation, the idea that businesses can be this powerful force for good. But how does that actually play out in the real world? Let's go back to those case studies. How are these companies actually putting these ideas into action when it comes to social transformation?
Let's start with Jaipur Rugs again. We already talked about their fair wages and job creation, but they go even further than that. They're also investing in things like education and healthcare for their weavers and their families.
So they're not just extracting value, they're actually investing in the well-being of these communities.
Exactly. They understand that a healthy, educated workforce is key to their success in the long run. And they've been really proactive about empowering women, giving them opportunities to become leaders and change makers.
That creates such a ripple effect. And how about Casas Bahia? How are they contributing to social transformation down in Brazil?
They're tackling this really fundamental issue, access to credit. Like we said, a lot of their customers don't have those traditional credit histories. So by creating this system based on trust and potential, Casas Bahia is opening up a world of possibilities for people who were basically shut out of the formal economy.
It's about empowering people to build a better future for themselves, a future they might not have even thought was possible. And then there's ITC's eChapal, which just blows me away every time I hear about it. How do they go beyond just providing technology and actually create that social transformation in rural India?
They're addressing a really crucial problem: information asymmetry. Before eChapal came along, farmers were basically at the mercy of middlemen. These middlemen controlled everything: information about prices, markets, even best practices for farming.
So eChapal comes in and levels the playing field, gives farmers the knowledge they need to make smart decisions.
Yeah.
And get better prices for their crops.
Exactly. By connecting farmers directly with markets and giving them good information, eChapal reduces the power of those exploitative middlemen. It creates a much fairer and more transparent system for everyone.
It's amazing to see these companies actually putting Prahalad's ideas into action and making a real difference.
And the impact is huge. Millions of people being lifted out of poverty, getting access to essential things, building better lives for themselves and their families. And it's all because companies are finally starting to see the potential of the BOP.
It makes you think what we could accomplish if we all shifted our perspective a little bit, if we started seeing the potential instead of just the problems.
That's the power of Prahalad's work. He challenges us to think differently, to see the opportunities that come when we look at the world from a new angle.
So for our listeners out there who are now feeling inspired to dig into these ideas a bit more, what are the key takeaways from the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid? What do we really want them to remember from this deep dive?
First and foremost, there's this massive untapped market at the bottom of the pyramid, full of consumers who are eager to engage. But it's not about going in with a savior complex. We need to recognize the strength and resilience of these communities, approach them with respect, and be open to learning from them.
We've got to ditch those outdated ideas about the BOP.
Absolutely. The BOP is not some monolithic entity. These are diverse consumers with their own unique needs and aspirations. Companies really need to do their homework, understand the local context, and build real partnerships based on trust and mutual benefit.
And those partnerships can lead to some really incredible innovations, like we saw with mobile banking and those other technologies that were created specifically for these markets.
And let's not forget the importance of building that supportive ecosystem, addressing issues like access to credit, making sure transactions are fair and transparent, investing in education and healthcare.
So it's about creating this positive feedback loop, where businesses can be successful while also helping communities thrive.
Exactly. The fortune at the bottom of the pyramid is more than just a book. It's a call to action. It's a challenge to rethink how we do business, embrace new approaches, and see the potential in creating a more inclusive and equitable world.
If these companies can achieve so much by changing their perspectives, just imagine what we could do if we all embrace that same mindset.
It's a future worth working towards. And for anyone who wants to dive deeper, we'll be sure to link to more information about these companies and Prahalad's work in the show notes.
This is a conversation that needs to keep going, on a global scale and in our own lives.